If you recall, this class is based a lot on one of the hierarchies that we learned early in the course, which is the hierarchy of how life is put together, from molecules all the way up to organisms and then beyond to ecosystems and the biosphere. That's sort of the organizational hierarchy that we're using in this class. And because of that, we learned a lot about how the building blocks of life are made and how those building blocks make up proteins and DNA and RNA and polysaccharides and lipid membranes and organelles. And we finally got all the way up to cells. And then we learned about how cells go through division and replication. And now we're going to keep going on our hierarchy to look at how cells can join together to make tissues. So cells were built from organelles and assembly lines, and then cells themselves are going to build up larger structures, which we call tissues. Then tissues are going to be the things that make organs. This is true only for multicell organisms, and in those multicell organisms that are not plants, there are 4 types of tissues. For example, muscle is one of the tissue types. Epithelium, which is kind of like a skin type of thing, is the second tissue type. Nervous tissue, nerves and the nervous system. And then finally, connective tissue, which you can kind of think of as a catch-all for all the other kinds of tissues. Muscle cells. Let's talk about them for a little bit. Muscle tissue has muscle cells in them, and the muscle cells actually can share the cytoplasmic fluid that they have. So normally you think of a cell as having a nucleus, the cytoplasm, and then surrounded by the plasma membrane, and the membrane on the outside that keeps it separate from all the other cells. But in muscle, that plasma membrane can merge with other plasma membranes, and so that you get kind of a giant cell that has many, many nuclei inside of it, and they're all sharing things together. The reason that muscle cells do this is so that they can have more actin and myosin fibers coursing up and down them. And muscles are producing way more actin and myosin than an average cell. And organizing these actin and myosin mechanical systems into long fibers and macroscopic motors that are longer than your typical microscopic cell. So that's all what's going on inside of the tissue. Muscle is kind of an example. Now, for an activity to think about as we think about how cells can form these very different tissues, think about your smartphone or your tablet. How do you use it? What do you do on your smartphone or your tablet? Now, if you are a young person, how you use the tablet compare to an older person using that same exact tablet or same exact phone? What if it's the exact same smartphone or tablet? Do you use it the same way? Probably not. They probably would use it for different things than you would, and vice versa. So this gives us an illustration of how cells that have the exact same DNA information, the exact same menu of choices, can make very different choices and become very different things. So a cell that has been told, be a muscle cell, starts making a lot of actin fibers and myosin machines that move along those actin fibers so that they can make muscle fibers. And you can think about what exactly led to that muscle becoming a muscle cell and why it does such different things. That's a good thought experiment for you. Another story I like to think about is the story of Jurassic Park, because in that movie and in that book, the dinosaurs that were created by taking the DNA out of some blood that was maybe found in a mosquito embedded in amber. So it was a blood cell from a dinosaur, and the DNA came out of that. But of course, it led to all the other cells of a dinosaur's body. It was supposedly injected into living cells of an existing organism, like a frog or a reptile, and then those cells then, with the DNA from the dinosaur, became dinosaur cells instead of reptile or frog cells. Now, I'm not sure that would really work, but You could imagine woolly mammoth's DNA being injected into the egg or a cell of a elephant and getting a very hairy elephant. Because we know that Dolly the sheep long ago, which was a sheep named Dolly, had been made because DNA from one sheep was injected into an emptied out cell of another sheep. So they emptied out the DNA out of one sheep's egg cell and injected the DNA from another sheep's egg cell, and that's what produced Dolly. So it's not too far-fetched to imagine things like woolly mammoths being born into our world. Now, cloning cells doesn't always mean that you swap out the DNA with another DNA, like dinosaur DNA instead of frog DNA. Stem cell therapy is considered a cloning type of therapy, and it leaves the DNA inside of the existing cell, but it can make kind of clones of the tissue that's involved and reprogram a cell that was going to become one thing and to make it become another thing, or a cell that didn't know what it was going to become, these stem cells, and tell them to become a certain type of cell so that we can have that tissue. So with the right kind of coaxing, you can get stem cells to form the types of tissues that you want. So far, no therapies have become well developed except for the transplant types of therapies, such as blood stem cells, which you use when you do a bone marrow transplant. But there are a lot of promising transplant and non-transplant stem cell therapies on the horizon, and you can think about them more now that you know more about biology. If you're going a little bit deeper, now's the time to read about how cells are organized to make complex structure. And the branch page for that gives you introduction to blood stem cells, and then the leaves go into the more details about what stem cells are and how tissues make more organs.